Welcome this evening to our webinar put on by SPAN, our Suicide Prevention Alliance of Northern Virginia. We welcome you this evening. I think it's a wonderful way for those of us here in Northern Virginia to wrap up this month of suicide prevention awareness and also the month of older Virginians' mental health recognition. So we will tonight go through a lot of information, and we're hoping that as we do that, you will type your questions into the question box so that we, at the end of this, will have the opportunity to have our esteemed panelists answer those for you. Next, please. Tonight, we're going to learn about SPAN and the various resources that are available in this area. We will be hearing, we're very fortunate to be able to hear from two experts in the field, and we hope also that you'll gain specific ideas to put into place. Hopefully, you'll be able to share your successes in helping to build resilience in your neighborhood, in your community, in your workplace, throughout your life, with all of those surrounding you. And we're hoping that we'll be able to give you tools for coping, for recognizing warning signs, and to be able to help you and others differentiate among the feeling of sadness, of anxiety, and of true depression. Just a few statistics, staggering statistics actually, from a recent CDC study where we see that suicide rates, I think this is no surprise, rose 30% in this century, 21st century that we're just barely into. 20% of older adults in the US experience a mental illness, a substance use disorder, or both. And I would say that's probably a very low number, but that's recognized and identified numbers. And tragically, in 2018, 198 people died by suicide in Northern Virginia. And I do have to asterisk that because I think what we found is, as data are collected, particularly for older adults, and I count myself in that grouping, many times suicide is not recognized. And if it's a violent suicide, potentially yes. But for those of us in that older age group, many times it's a very quiet suicide, and it's not picked up as suicide because of the age of the individuals. And in the last 30 days before this June survey was taken, where almost 41% of United States adults reported struggling with substance use disorder issues, mental health issues. In the 30 days before that survey, 25% of the adults up to the 24-year-old group seriously considered suicide. Rather staggering, but in fact, given the pandemic that we've endured and are continuing, probably not too surprising. Next, please. Just a list of resources that will be on the SPAN website, so you don't have to rapidly copy them all down now, but a myriad of resources for instant kind of response, and also those for getting a lot more information. Next, please. As I had mentioned, our agenda will be the welcome. I'll go through just a little bit of housekeeping, introducing our panelists, and then we will have a panel discussion, questions from you, which is what this is all about, and then just closing wrap-up remarks. Next, please. And I'm probably, this is almost humorous to have me giving the directions on how to deal with technology, but for those who aren't any more confident with it than I am, there's a number here. If you're having trouble hearing with your computer speakers, you can call into that number. Also, you can use the audio tab to transfer from computer audio to a phone call option just to get the audio off your phone call. Unlike what it says here, we're not using the raise hand icon. So instead, when the time comes and you have a question during presentations or after, please go ahead and type your question into the questions box, and that way we'll be able to pull them and have them answered in order. Next, please. About us, SPAN is, and next, please. SPAN is a coalition in the Northern Virginia area of all of the jurisdictions in what we call Planning District 8. The jurisdictions, the local governments, the community services boards, the communities in those areas, and the community partners, all working together to raise awareness, to share resources rather than unnecessarily duplicating, and hopefully to prevent suicides here in Northern Virginia. We convene, we host, we coordinate. Our job is to get information out and to hook people in need up with the kind of resources that they need, or their family member or loved one needs, in order to prevent suicides here in Northern Virginia. Next, please. Our website, and then our partners on the next slide. Those are just some of the partners within the SPAN Alliance, and we welcome additional groups. If you represent a group that works on this issue and you'd like to join SPAN and be a part of the working group, please give us that information in the question box, and we will make sure that we get back to you at the end, either this evening or very shortly thereafter. Next, please. We are very, very fortunate this evening to have, as I said, two experts in the field who have worked across the age span, from young children all the way through older adults, in trying to help those folks they work with cultivate, as Dr. Chandler says, a culture of learning, and she works to be a catalyst for individual, systemic, and social change. Further, Dr. Chandler states that she combines her background and training in social work, clinical psychology, and law in her approach to being a resilience-driven leader. She launched her clinical career in Southern California and has moved across the country, to our great advantage, to here on the East Coast, and in that process has served as an associate professor of social work on the faculties at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and later at George Mason University. Currently, she is the president of the National Organization of Forensic Social Work and serves as a proud appointee to the Fairfax City Commission for Women. Dr. Hardy-Chandler's trailblazing 30-year career in direct practice, academia, and senior management converge perfectly in her role now as the director of the Center for Children and Families in the Alexandria Department of Community and Human Services, which includes serving as co-chair of RAISE, Alexandria's trauma-informed community network. She is also an owner of a woman-owned minority consultancy practice called LEADS, L-E-A-D-S, LLC. After Dr. Chandler speaks, we'll hear from Dr. Marquez, who is a PhD and a licensed clinical psychologist and professional counselor here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. He also is the director of the behavioral health practice at the Greater Prince William Health Center in Prince William County. He's worked in the field of mental health for more than 20 years and has specialized in working with children, adults, geriatrics, individuals, couples, families, and is fluent in both English and Spanish. Dr. Marquez has developed expertise in the areas of trauma, ADHD, Asperger's, depression, anxiety, and other DSM disorders. Dr. Marquez approaches therapy from a holistic perspective, using techniques from a client-focused, humanistic, motivational, and reality-based therapy blend. So with that, Dr. Chandler, we look forward to hearing your presentation. Thank you for being here.
Great. I'm very happy to be here. And as I bring up my slides, I do want to certainly thank SPAN for hosting this event today. And also, I want to thank everybody who's in attendance. In this time when there is so much uncertainty and so much unpredictability, it's really good actually to come together in a space where we're going to be talking about maybe some of the things that we can do in service to our family members, our friends, our neighbors, our clients, our colleagues, and also ourselves in terms of coming to a safer space. So I like to use metaphors. And so I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the road to resilience. I mentioned earlier to my colleagues that my last name is Hardy, which literally means resilient. So I take this very personally and professionally. But I want to talk about this road and this journey that we're trying to embark on in service to our communities. So I want to start with basically talking about the road itself. It would be great if we could, wave a magic wand and have everything kind of be okay. But it's certainly a process. It's a path, and I like to think about it kind of as a road. And as we're traveling down this road, right, to one side, there might be an easier path, fewer obstacles, happiness, joy, sunshine. And to the other side in the lanes, as we move maybe left, it might get a little darker, more obstacles, fog, things are in the way. And it's kind of like we're all trying to stay in that middle lane. We're all trying to stay someplace where, as normal humans, we are sometimes happy, we're sometimes a little sadder, and that's okay. The thing is, though, with COVID-19, it's shifted us all a little bit to that darker side, to that rougher side of the road. All of us are feeling some effect, but the impact really varies depending on the lane we started out in. So there might be different impacts depending on where we were pre-COVID. So there are new hazards for all of us, but I'd also like to argue that there are new opportunities. And as we're dealing with all of these things, I have also seen, and I have to highlight that I have seen wonderful creativity on the part of people who are working with me in the Center for Children and Families and throughout our community. I've seen some partnerships come up that I had never seen before. And I do love this proverb that smooth seas do not make skillful sailors. So I think even through the rough times, we have some opportunities to do things better as a community. So I mentioned in the beginning that, or my title was about the road to resilience, 5 critical questions. So I want to start with the first critical question, which is, where are we going? Well, we definitely want to go to a place for safety, again, for ourselves, for our family members, for our neighbors, our colleagues, our clients in some cases. And we want to do that with some sense of well-being completely intact. But between here and there are these 2 storms that are raging around us. One is COVID-19, and the other is racial injustice. And people have referred to them as the 2 pandemics. One we've known about for less than a year, one we've known about for 400 years. And these are kind of, I would describe it as sort of the weather around us as we're trying to make this journey towards safety and wellness. So we do need to know where we're going. The second question is, we also need to know our starting point. And I use this example over and over again. If you go to a mall, remember going to the mall? That was a while back. But if you go to a mall that you're not familiar with, you go to the directory. And if you want to go to Old Navy, or if you want to go to Williams-Sonoma, or in my case, the food court, which is always the case, you have to go to the directory and you'll see that little red dot that says you are here. In order to get there, we all have to know what we're starting with. So I invite and encourage everybody who is here and present tonight to really think about how you're handling stress right now, and particularly those of you who are parents of, or teachers, or those who are working with kids. The greatest gift in terms of mental health and well-being that we can offer our kids is that we're working on being okay. More than what we say, children pick up, very young children, even prenatally, some research shows, pick up on the emotions of the adults around them, their parents. So we need to check ourselves in order to be in the right place to help others. The second thing I think we need to focus on in our starting point is shining a light on strengths. In all of this, it's very difficult to be reminded of what the strengths are. All that's going on can obscure some of the things that could be resources that could be helpful to us in maintaining safety and helping others. So we don't want to ignore our strengths. And the third thing, I think we need to pack the skills, tools, and resources that have worked before, the things that have at least gotten us to this point. And we'll talk a little bit about those as well. Okay. So the third question, when should we adjust our course? So again, we're taking this trip, life is a highway, and there are lots of lists indicating what to look for, excuse me, with regard to mental health, with regard to depression, emotional turmoil. And I kind of combined the best of those lists into 4, I hope, easy to remember categories. And you just think of the directions, north, south, east, west. So what in general do we want to look for to give us some indication that we might need to adjust where we're going? The first is a new behavior. Think of north, a new behavior. So if someone was previously very outgoing and now they're being more reclusive, or if someone previously performed well at work, or they got good grades and now they're not, these are things that we want to pay attention to in terms of a possible need. Another thing, south, sadness. I think most of us know what sadness looks like, but we also need to pay attention to agitation, irritability, and sometimes aggression. We see some of these other things with younger kids. So developmentally, sadness might look very different depending on where someone is in their developmental stage. Some things that we mistake as acting out or behavior problems may not be what those are. They may be sadness if a child has difficulty with coping skills or articulating what's going on with them. E, like east, is eating and sleeping, those things that we do every day. And another piece of this is low energy. If you or someone you know, you might say, oh, they've suddenly become so lazy. It may not be laziness. It may be the low energy that's coming with maybe some feelings of hopelessness or sadness or despair or depression. North, south, east, and west. W is withdrawal from people, withdrawal from activities, maybe things that people previously enjoyed, not enjoying them as much anymore. Again, any one of these things we all experience, but when we see these kind of become a pattern, we want to pay attention and we want to activate our GPS. And what is our GPS? Those are those people around us who can help us get back on the track, our trusted friends, professionals, therapists, counselors, teachers, our navigators that can help us navigate through and work our way through some of those obstacles and dark times that we might face. The fourth question is, what are our blind spots? So if you're driving in a car, every vehicle has blind spots, back there and back there. There are things outside of your view. And the problem with blind spots is just because we don't see them, don't mean they're not dangerous. If we move over in a lane and there's a car there that we don't see, that can be a problem. And we have emotional blind spots too. And we can have these blind spots for a number of reasons. We can have blind spots because of trauma. We can have blind spots because we're overwhelmed, and who isn't struggling with that right now? Things like implicit bias, increased financial problems, and housing insecurity that is so much a part of our neighbors' daily experience right now. Positive COVID tests and the worry that come with that. People can recover, and there are question marks about some of the longer term effects of that. Discomfort, even with the topic of suicide, topic of depression, with feelings and wanting to avoid those. And a big one is social media, and really narrowing our view with what we expose ourselves through through social media. So what can we do to basically find our blind spot detection system. So in newer cars, forgive me, I didn't know this until recently, but there are blind spot detection systems that bring those things that are out of your view more into your view. And one of the things that we can do to counter our blind spots is by building a virtual sense of community. You'll have to ignore the alarm going off. Making connections is one of the biggest things that's related to dealing with stress, dealing with depression, sad feelings. Is just doing it in a different way than we used to do it before. Now we have to do it in creative ways. We have to take advantage of virtual options like this. I know people who are meeting in cul-de-sacs or in driveways, just some way to maintain that connection. Another way is to uphold a routine. We talked about this being a time of great uncertainty. And one way to counter that is to structure what we can, to maximize what we do have control over. And sometimes that's just the structure of our day. That's getting up and doing some of the things that are familiar and comforting to us. And of course, we talked about using past tools that have helped us before and maybe using those more frequently, and being open to professional help. So the things that are a part of our blind spots can be risk factors, but the things that are part of our blind spot detection center are actually protective factors that can help us navigate our way. And so the fifth and final question is, what do we leave behind through all of this COVID, racial injustice conversations? What are we leaving behind? Well, we're leaving behind normal, that's for sure, just the basic things of being able to shake people's hands without worrying, or paying attention to how far the table is from another table when you go to a restaurant. Those things are kind of a part of our yesterday. We're leaving back predictability in some cases, which is why we want to instill as much predictability in our day and in our interactions as we can. And we're also leaving behind, and this is a big one, this might be a little controversial, we're leaving behind us versus them, because if there's anything the coronavirus has taught us is that this is a small world and we're all interconnected. We used to say, oh, you know, it's too bad about them over there and the famine, or them over there where there's political unrest, or them over there dealing with that virus. And coronavirus has said, nope, over there could quickly be over here. Them over there can quickly be us. So I think that's one of the things that we're leaving behind. We're also leaving a lot of things that are a part of our normal way of experiencing life. Some things are good and some things are not so good. But change, whether it's good or bad, equals loss. And we do have to help ourselves go through a grieving process of recognizing that change is happening, and that means something is different, something is going away, and giving people sometimes the opportunity to grieve what those losses are. It doesn't always look like something drastic. People, even just losing their normal routine is a loss. And we want to pay attention to that. I'm not going to go into this in detail, but when we're talking about preventing suicide, we're talking about also establishing good communication early. So this is going to be a part of what I'm going to make available to you. And it's just a table about how we can have ways of building communication with kids up to a year, up to 3 years, 6 years, 8 years, and what tools we have to foster that good communication. So when we need to talk about things hard, we've set that foundation. And then finally, you know, I talked about the road to resilience. This is actually an acronym. So when you think of ROAD, think of resilient options, advocacy, and decisions, and where you can exert control in circumstances to help others, to help yourself, to reach out. And speaking of reaching out, in addition to Jane's resources, these will also be made available to you. You don't have to copy them down, but we'll make them available to all of the attendees today. And I'll end there and hand it back to Jane. Thank you.
Thank you, feels very much. That's it's a lot, power-packed presentation that I know for me. I'm taking notes, making note of various things. Really grateful for that. Thank you. Dr. Marquez, welcome.
Thank you. Had a little PowerPoint, but I don't think I have access to your system. So.
Dr. Marquez, this is Nikisha. I'm about to give you permission. Just 1 second. Thank you.
Oh, okay, no problem. Huh? I guess. Oops. Um, all right. So let's see if this works now. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can.
All right, magnificent. So I'm Dr. Marquez. I work with Greater Prince William Community Health Center in Prince William County, but we serve all of the Northern Virginia area. And as mentioned before, I actually work with a lot of young people, but I also work with children, adults, and people of all ages. I think that the main message that we have to embrace this year is the idea that 2020 has been chaotic. And there have been a significant amount of difficulties that have impacted people from multiple different perspectives. The biggest problem that we find at the center and in my practice is that people are becoming saturated with the chaos. And within that context of saturation, coming from being connected to the radio, being connected to the news, to the newspaper, to social media, and bombardment of information, people are feeling overwhelmed and sometimes feel that they cannot disconnect from any of these things. The first thing that I communicate to people, and that the first thing that I try to get anybody that comes see me to do, is the idea of disconnecting from all of these negative influencers in their lives. And it's hard to say to somebody, oh, just disconnect from social media or don't watch the news, because it's a reality and people are going to be talking about it. But there has to be a degree of balance and space where we actually make a point to not fall in a space where we're so saturated by negativity that becomes our day-to-day normal, because that will lead us to spaces where we will feel very anxious, very concerned, to a degree of developing potentially anxiety, or very sad, extremely overwhelmed by what is happening and how the world sometimes seems chaotic, to a space where we could develop some form of symptomatology in the world of depression. And let's be clear, depression and anxiety are real pathologies, real illnesses. They just don't simply develop oftentimes from things that are happening. Sometimes people actually develop these conditions because they're part of their genetic makeup. But the epidemic that we have right now in the United States of depression and anxiety seems to be drifting more toward a space of situational and events and things that are happening around us, and the way we are also existing and living on a day-to-day basis. What seems to be happening is that, in that sense, the way we are living society does not give us enough space to develop the natural tools that our brain has evolved over time to make us resilient. We have a series of chemicals in the brain and difficult chemicals in the body to help us function like a good, well-oiled machine. But with the rate of society that we have right now, and the style of our society, we have fallen in the sideway, and we are not allowing our body to generate all of these chemicals. Main chemicals that come to mind are serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, and endorphins. As you will see in the PowerPoint, these are the chemicals that help us be feel happy, feel focused, feel connected, feel energetic. And I think that one of the biggest factors that we have lost in many ways for people because of COVID-19 is connection. We are, naturally speaking, we are social creatures, we are social beings, and we enjoy our connections. We enjoy having our friends around. We enjoy having people that care about us, and we enjoy caring about others. And COVID-19 has disconnected us from that reality. So in many ways, COVID-19 put a pause and inflicted even more causality on the notion of not being able to produce the chemicals that we need in our brain to be fulfilled. Within that context, we need to recreate ourselves. And many of us have started doing different things like connecting online, connecting in Zoom, exercising with friends through means like Zoom or go-to meetings or things of that nature. And that would be extremely important moving into this space of change and recreating our natural dynamics. The chemicals of the brain that we have and that we need to feel uh, connected, to feel happy, to feel empowered, to feel energized, are highly impacted by multiple things in our life. And one of these things is exercising. The exercising helps in many ways reduce the risk of depression, reduce the risk of anxiety. It helps with concentration. It helps with sleep. Um, it helps with an immune system. It reduces stress. Another big factor is food. Food, our diet, our social diet is not really the best. And sometimes it involves too many cans, too many bags, and too many boxes. Um, so this is also very important to be looking at the way we're dieting, the way we're eating. I'm not even talking about a special diet, just looking at the lifestyle that we have in terms of how we eat and how this might be impacting our day-to-day function and this space of depression and anxiety and loneliness and weariness that people might be experiencing during this uncertain time that we're living. Um, Another aspect of connection and is the idea of connecting with our body, connecting with our environment, connecting with ourselves. And that's something that, because of the stressful life that we often live, we don't do often enough. So it's very important. It will be very important to go back to a space where we allow ourselves to connect with our body through exercising, and exercising doesn't involve anymore going to the gym. It would involve going out in nature, taking nature walks, just walking the dog in the neighborhood, hanging around and just taking an actual walk. We have become a very sedentary society. And we spend a lot of time binge watching Netflix sometimes. Um, I actually right now I'm recovering from COVID-19, and I've been actually in my house for the last 14 days. The first 10, 12 days of the recovery process, I could not get out of my room, and because I have this lifestyle of connectivity with my nature, connectivity with my animals, I was having at one point or another, I was having a hard time. Now I'm feeling much better, and I was able to go back and take out the nature walk. And I live in an area that I can do that without exposing anybody. And I was able to take my dogs out and hang out with my Great Danes. But I think that that's a very sacred space that we lose because of the type of stressors that we have, and with the new way we're existing COVID-19, where everything is virtual, we are in jeopardy of losing that even more. Because now our office is in the house, inside the house. Our friends, we feel like we have to see them through this space of virtual connectivity. Everything that we do in terms of exercising also comes to this space of virtual reality. So we have to be careful and develop a balance where we do reconnect with those around us and the things that are important to us in a more normative way. We are running the risk also of disconnecting from our loved ones, because if you're home all day looking at a screensaver and dealing with the internet and dealing with virtual realities in that sense, or connecting through virtual means with other people, the people around you are, everybody's doing the same. People will disconnect even more so that our society has already proposed over time. So it is important to connect with people at home and engage in things that don't involve electronics, or again, binge watching Netflix, and connect with people at a different level where we have fun with our loved ones and we reconnect with our loved ones and learn from each other again. This is actually quite an interesting time, I think, because we can recreate our whole structure of society in many different ways, and we should be carefully looking at what has worked for us and what has not worked in the past, and taking that and using it as tools to enhance our levels of resiliency as we recreate our new normal. I think that animals are magnificent, as I mentioned before. So that's something that if you don't have a pet, maybe this is a time. If you feel alone, if you feel disconnected, maybe this is a time to get a pet. Having a pet is like having a family member in the house. So it should not just be a solution that is taken lightly. It takes work and it takes a lot of effort, but their animals are incredible to help with enhancing resiliency, enhancing feelings of positivity and positive energy within us. And in our current reality, we can always use the tools that we have. If you feel that you're an at-risk individual or feel that you don't want to be going out to places, you can always use virtual connections and reestablish friendship and connect with friendships within the space that we have virtually, like Zoom or GoToMeeting or Teams or things of that nature. This is a little PowerPoint that I actually, every time that I look at the Zoom camera, I always feel like I'm looking at the Sesame Street scene where everybody's singing and talking. Within the context of that virtual reality, we have the notion of developing new activities that we can do virtually to keep people connected. So one thing that we've done, my friends and I, especially when we were high on the quarantine, where nobody was going out, was the notion of doing trivia games and dress-up days. We would dress up one day as Star Wars or 80s lookalikes and things of that nature, just to keep things entertained, and that has helped us stay connected. Now that I actually, for the first time, had to go into quarantine because I have been working at a federally qualified health center since the quarantine started, this level of connectivity helped me stay upbeat while I was fighting the symptoms of COVID. So I think that developing that virtual space where you can connect with your friends and sustain those friendships in a fun way that makes you laugh. Laughter is the power tool of healthy lifestyle. It's actually quite important. There is space now. I think we, at this point, we know enough about COVID-19 to say that there is space now that we can go safely out and engage with people in the community. But there's still a lot that we have not fully learned and we don't fully understand. So we want to be careful and we want to follow CDC recommendations in social distancing, wearing masks. After a certain period of quarantine, with my personal friendships, we started going out and we would sustain space between us and wear our mask. And because I knew that I was a potential higher risk for everybody else, I was very conscious of doing extra steps to protect others around me, given that I work in the health field. I think that in this space, as the statistics mentioned in the beginning, there is the potential for people to fall by the wayside and become very negatively impacted by the space of separation that we're in. And it's very important that we understand the different changes that people might be showing and what people might be presenting on a day-to-day, and things that people might be saying are very important to note and keep in mind in order to be able to help them cope when we notice that they're too overwhelmed. But as I mentioned in the beginning, I think it all goes back to connections. We want to connect with people around us. We want to connect with people that we care about, and we want to have conversations with them. Think that therapy is extremely important. That's what I have dedicated my life to. And I think that people should start normalizing the process of therapy. And now that even virtually you can see a therapist, maybe this is a space, if you feel too overwhelmed, too anxious, too depressed, this is the space to start engaging in a process of exploration, to grow, to expand your horizons, to expand your resiliency. Or if you've been struggling with depression and anxiety, and you know it, this is the time to reconnect with a good therapist and discuss things that you can do to actually feel better. I think that if you take step by steps the different suggestions that I placed before for in the PowerPoint, like exercising, eating better, connecting with people, looking to do meaningful things for yourself, engaging, you will start feeling better. But I think also that there's nothing wrong with connecting with the therapist and having the discussion and trying to go through a guided path where you can actually feel better. Medication helps, especially if you're in a very dark space right now. Medication truly helps. Connect with your primary care doctor, connect with your psychiatrist, and engage in a discussion of what might be helpful to me. Um, and just look for the space of personal growth and personal wellness, keeping in mind that we all want to be happy, we all want and strive to be loved, and that we all want to feel fully alive and connected. And but we need to start by connecting with ourselves, connecting with our environment, connecting with our loved ones, and learning to understand us and what we need to um, achieve that sacred space of wellness. That's kind of my PowerPoint presentation.
Thank you. That was, between the two presentations, we have a lot to think about, to chew on for sure. And hopefully now we have some questions coming into the question box. Jamie or Nikisha, do we have questions in the box at this point?
The only question I did see is the question of, will these slides be available? And I think you mentioned that they will be available.
Yes, they will go up on the SPAN website, and probably, I'm just saying, probably each individual CSB can then take from the SPAN website for those who feel that it would have more exposure within their jurisdiction. So look both on the SPAN website and also on your local Community Services Board website. Well, I've got some questions here, so I'm going to kick it off, and that'll maybe give people time to write their questions. What do? I hear from older folks, which is a great deal of my work side of my life, working with older Virginians, that they're feeling very, very stressed out about going out at all, even things that they enjoyed, going to the grocery store, going to whatever, to the market. And now there's a real feeling of panic that they feel tightening at the thought that they are going out and obviously potentially risking exposure to COVID, what can we say to them to help them re-enter what at least used to be normal life, and also to work with and reduce that stress?
Would you like me to start?
Sure.
So first of all, you know, we really have to attend to our older adults because they're a high risk group. That's the second highest group of suicide risk population, second behind those who are 45 to 64, somewhere around there. So one of the things is we do have to pay attention to them in the various ways that we can. I think Dr. Marquez talked about some creative ways of maintaining connection. And first of all, we have to maintain those opportunities to communicate, make those calls. Remember picking up the telephone, you know, make those calls, make those connections so that we can give them an opportunity to talk about their fears and worries, their worries that many of us have. And sometimes people first just need to be heard. They need to have somebody who is empathizing with the fact that they're worried and they're concerned that they can't, you know, go out and meet their friends at the park or go to the store as casually as they could before. I think a part of that is normal under these circumstances. And then we go to, well, what do we have at our disposal? We do have some workarounds that we didn't have before, or at least that I don't remember, in terms of delivery services. Hey, can I help you get connected to a delivery service? Can I connect you to a resource where you can get what you need? It's not the same. And remember, we talked about change being a grieving process. You know, sometimes helping our older adults grieve the fact that we can't do it the same way we did before. But let's try and figure out a different way for you to get what you need to be safe and to have the resources that you need, even if it's in a different way. And if you want to complain about it being in a different way, I'm here for you. I can hear that. I can take that, right? That's where I would start.
Awesome. Dr. Marquez, any other thoughts?
Yeah, a lot of the work that we have doing in the community center, for my team in particular, has to do with helping people connect. And that is not just the word, it's the essence of, we have been teaching people that might not be too technological on how to connect with people that they care about and do all of these different activities that keep them connected with. What I recommend to my friends and family also is the same notion: calling each other, sustaining connections through things like Skype. Right now we have a family group, and in that group I have people that are in Texas right now connecting on a regular basis, people that are in Florida, and we are just engaged that way. And for a minute we did not have the ability to fully engage our older members of our family. So somebody was able to stop by their house and help them. Nowadays, everybody has a smartphone. Some people are harder to understand how to play with them. So we had somebody that was relatively safe stop by and kind of teach our older family members how to use and how to connect through the platform that we're using. I do a lot of work in my community, specifically in my neighborhood, to do connections in the neighborhood. We have a history of organizing barbecues and events. So right now we organize like a little block party, but everybody stays in kind of 6 feet distance. And when we have older folks join us, people that are at higher risk, also we have some medically compromised neighbors. We all make a point to protect them. And I think that that is a key component. Sometimes I go out and I see people acting as if this was not real. It's very real. So COVID-19 is very real. And for people to be able to be safe and be connected, you need to feel safe. And you need to see that other people care about you by behaving in ways that promote safety. Personally, if I go somewhere that people are not adequately wearing a mask and sustaining social distance, I just leave. Not even because of my health, but because I am potentially I could potentially be more exposed than other people to the virus because of my work in the health system. So it's a matter of being empathic and conscientious of what we are and where we're at in time right now. And not to get political or anything like that, but we need to stop the notion of denial that this is happening. This is our new reality. And we need to develop a new reality accommodating this virus that has impacted our society for everybody to be able to go back to the new normal. Those are my thoughts kind of on that question.
Jane?
Okay. Yes.
Jane, we've got a group of questions from 4 or 5 folks asking in general how to assist a family member or a close friend who we may be having concerns about in terms of mood, unwillingness to connect, and even to the extent that there may be some concern about safety. So generally how to approach and support and assist, and then kind of a follow-on in terms of resources that may be out there.
Who would like to take first stab at that?
Ladies first.
So first of all, I advise erring on the side of caution. You know, let's talk about some significant risk factors when we're looking at suicidality. One is if they're threatening suicide. Another one is if they're trying to figure out a way to commit suicide, or if they're writing or posting on social media about death and these kinds of things. We want to err on the side of caution and take those concerns very seriously. Don't brush it off. Don't hope that it's going to be better the next day. We certainly do, but in case there is an opportunity to reach out, there are hotlines which we've shown a couple of times and are publicly available. Certainly if it's urgent. You know, I talked about that freeway, and people are kind of closer and closer to that dangerous side where there are a lot of obstacles and it's hard to see their way out. I think the closer they are to that sort of hopelessness kind of state, the more action we want to take to make them safe. So that in some cases may be hospitalization. You know, there's an old story about, I think this guy's name was Joshua Speed, who I understand stayed with President Lincoln during a dark time when he was suicidal and just was there physically making sure that things that he could harm himself with actually were taken away, and just staying in his presence. So what we do has to be proportional to what we're seeing, but we definitely want to take it very seriously. And there are times when people either want help but don't know how to access it. And there are sometimes when people who don't want help, but we need to get them help anyway.
Yeah, I think that the basis to everything, and I go back to the space of connection, but also the idea of meaning. Some people find that they have lost meaning in life, that they don't have purpose, and just by reestablishing those connections and reminding them of the space of love that you have for each other within your families and friends, and having that conversation of I'm worried about you. I think we should work together to try to get you help. A lot of people don't look for help because of the fear of the stigma. But the reality is that if you had cancer, you will go to your physician and look for help. If you have diabetes, you will go to your physician and look for help. So if you feel in this negative space, if your family member is struggling, there should be no trepidation to say, you know, maybe we need to go talk to a counselor. Maybe we need to go stop by the community service board and seek some help. Maybe we should call this community service board. Some of them are having people walk in, some of them are only working virtually right now. Maybe we need to go to the ER if the pain is so much, right? If I have a lot of pain, I go to the ER for anything else. So that sacred space of understanding that mental health and physical health are not two different things is incredibly important. And it's the one single thing that I truly believe saves lives. Normalizing the process, embracing the idea without being judgmental that if I'm struggling, it's not because I want to struggle. It's because this has taken control, this has overpowered me, and I don't know how to get out of this dark place that I'm in. So those around you, those around somebody in that space should be able to say, I'm here for you. I'm present and I'm going to support you, and I'm going to support you through the process of healing. So those are my thoughts.
And sort of to follow on that, what is there damage in confronting in a gentle way, but confronting particularly a family member, maybe a neighbor, to just flat say, are you considering taking your life? Are you considering suicide? If you see these signs and you really are worried, what risk is there in do we push someone farther by asking that?
The danger is in not asking. And we've seen over and over again that addressing it up front does not prompt, and that's what people are afraid of. When we talked about people avoiding some of those hard conversations, it's with our own discomfort, but bringing that up, confronting it directly is the best way. You're not making the situation worse. And in fact, in a lot of situations, people are relieved that someone else is bringing it up because they've struggled with sharing it themselves or articulating it. There's no harm in bringing it up. There's no elevated harm. If someone's been thinking about suicide, you mentioning it isn't going to exacerbate that. But I think that the danger is in in asking the question directly. The danger is in not asking. The danger is in not exploring, not asking some of those questions and having that conversation with the person about how they're genuinely feeling. And hopefully that relationship has been built over time. You know, hopefully that you have a relationship with this person. They know that you care about them, and that this question and the help that you're seeking is coming from a place of love and caring.
Yeah.
Dr. Marquez?
I sometimes compare the idea to the idea of CPR. And now we have mental health CPR also, that I wish it was taught as openly and as regularly as regular CPR. But I guess the different CSPs in our community are doing a good job of spreading the education through mental health first aid. But it's the idea of if I approach you and you're choking and I ask you, are you choking? And you do this, it's not going to make a difference unless I act. So if I am going to approach the person, I need to be ready to support and help the person through the pain, and take the step-by-steps of helping them to a place where they will get the help they need. And that will be the only caution and concern that I usually share with parents. There's nothing wrong with asking your kid. There's nothing wrong with asking your husband. The idea of, are you in so much pain that you have considering taking your life? Are you in so much emotional pain, so much turmoil right now that you're giving up? There's nothing wrong with that conversation, but we need to be ready for the after. And ready is really in many ways simple if you have the heart and love for that person, as long as you keep that mindset of, I'm not here to judge, I'm here to support. I'm here to walk with you. I don't even have to guide you. I just need to walk with you. That's what I do as a therapist. I have a little bit more knowledge than other people in terms of who I need to call and what system can I tap in to support you. But you can access that through the community service board. You can access that through a hotline. It's the willingness to engage in that space of, I am here.
Thank you. You know, I think also we read a lot, we hear a lot, and particularly in social media about mindfulness. And I'm sort of wondering how that plays into what we're going through right now, the whole isolation to the extreme of quarantine. how would getting more in touch and being more in a state of mindfulness, does that help us through this? Help me there.
So I've actually, I have been working for many years in the process of enhancing resiliency through meditation and mindfulness and all of these exercises that people have different names for. And the reality is that notion of connecting within yourself, connecting with all of the positive things that exist within you, and even the negative emotions that exist within us. Sometimes we try to push away our negative emotions and we hide them, and that's why they seem to come back even stronger sometimes, because we don't come to a space of realization where we acknowledge the fact that we get angry, we get sad, we become anxious, and all of those are normal emotions. So what mindfulness does is get you to a space where you accept those good things that you have and those negative things that you have, and you learn by quieting yourself for a second and looking inside of you and experiencing that moment for yourself of learning who you truly are. Does it help? I think that it is the quintessential thing that we can do to enhance resiliency. And it comes in many different ways. Some people do it through prayer. Some people do it through yoga exercises. Some people do it through Tai Chi. Some people do it through just the notion of sitting in nature. Some people do it by sitting with their dog and petting their dog. So meditation, mindfulness, and all of these things don't have one single thing that you need to, oh, that's what I need to be doing, sitting, crossing my legs, and kind of just meditating. No, it involves that connectability, that internal connection with the self, that embracement of who you are, that embracement of being able to say, why do I feel sad today? What good things have happened today to me that I am not seeing, and that I'm allowing all the negative things that might have happened, or that single negative thing that happened, to take so much power and so much energy away from me. And that's sometimes our reality, especially when we struggle with depression and anxiety. That becomes kind of the reality. We focus only on the negative thing, even if that negative thing was 5 minutes of time in a long day. Those 5 negative minutes take so much power and take so much out of us. And that's the space that mindfulness allows us to look inside and say, oh, wait, I had 10 hours of good things happening to me, and I'm only focusing on these 15 minutes that I had with my boss, or these 20 minutes that I had with my wife. What is that all about? And once you do that, you can always look for assistance from a coach or a therapist or a priest, a minister, somebody that you trust, a friend, and talk about, I've not been feeling well. This is then the next level of connection with self, and then connection with those that love us.
Awesome.
Well, I love this question, because I am very pleased to announce that one of the things that we did in the city of Alexandria in response to the pandemic is set up wellness circles for staff. So first of all, recognizing that all of the things that the general community is facing, helpers, our therapists, our case managers, our staff, our social workers, our admin, they too are also experiencing all of that while they're trying to help others. So we set up a wellness circle as part of our trauma-informed community network. We call it RAISE, Resilience, Alexandria, Informed Support, Elevate. And one of our members is especially skilled in mindfulness techniques involving trauma. She has a long history of working with first responders, and having that available. Dr. Marquez talked about there are multiple ways that you can engage in willfulness, in mindfulness and other well-being practices, but having that half hour to 45 minutes available to Alexandria employees was tremendous in terms of just them being able to ground themselves. I think that there is one of the protective factors that keeps coming up over and over again in the research and in our experience in working with clients is some sense of spirituality, and not necessarily religious, although those can overlap, but some sense of connection to something beyond oneself is a preventative factor for suicide. And in the wellness circle, there is an explicit sort of an approach to what's called the window of tolerance, and helping people come from those extreme spaces where, you know, they're not, you know, worried and agitated, and they're not like numb, but in that, back in that middle space, back in that middle lane, and bringing people there. So that has multiple payoffs, because when we're helping the staff who are serving the community benefits, even if they coworkers benefit, even if they never came to the wellness circle. That on top of encouraging self-care. Self-care we don't think about as a suicide prevention technique, but it is. Self-care for our healthcare providers, self-care for community members as an individual. There's even some discussion about just ethically, it's something that we should engage in so that we can always bring our best selves to any space. So I'm happy that we have that. Thank you to the Friends of the CSB who are supporting that. We did it for 2 months, and by popular demand, our Friends of the CSB extended it through December. So we're definitely trying to have this multifaceted effect in supporting wellness.
Wow, that's interesting. And I can't even begin, I think, to put words to how stressed out both ER docs, hospital docs, GPs, behavioral therapists, who just the gamut of people caring for and caring about so many people really in dire need, and in many different ways, all at the same time presenting. That's got to be incredibly draining, I think. Which sort of then also brings up, I think we all know that go-to person that always has an open ear, is willing to listen, seems to have the broadest shoulder in the world to say, oh, I can carry my burdens and other people's burdens. What should we look for from those folks who are always the go-to, not just for me to go to unload and get that oomph that I need, but I see other people going, what do we look for in that person whose shoulders maybe are starting to get a little rounded, and they might be getting a little bit droopy, but they're that pillar of strength, so they can't let the real person or what they're feeling at that point, I guess, show. When the pillar starts to crumble a little bit and maybe just needs a little shoring up, how do we recognize that in somebody that is just normally so strong? And then what do we do about it?
I'll respond. Yeah, you know, everybody is in a different place in their resilience journey. Not everybody is in the same place. And there are those people who are historically pillars. They're the one person in the family that all the siblings go to for help, or the parents can rely on. And in this difficult time, it's escalated. I feel like COVID has been a magnifying glass for everything, for the worst things that are going on, but also for the best things that are going on. And it's also magnifying the responsibility of some of those people who have tried to be that, you know, that pillar, that helping person that people can go to. One of the best things that you can do is just check in with them. You know, when people see those people as the pillar, something as small as just turning around and saying, and how are you doing? What do you need? Is one of the things, and that in and of itself can be very helpful. We also have to support them in their check-in of how they're handling stress, and really recognizing that they may have to take a break from being the helper and get help. And that's okay. All of the help that they've been around to provide for other people, maybe they can take a time to get the help they need to refresh. And the argument I use for helpers is, the more you take care of yourself, the more people you're going to be able to help. They're motivated by helping other people. And so they sometimes will think it's selfish to take care of themselves. You can help more people. Just take some time away. You'll be in a better position to help other people. So we do have to be careful with those people, because they can go and go and go, and help them to stop and look at really where they are, that they don't have to carry that burden alone, and that they too can help others as they're helping themselves. That's a gift that we give other people. When we're helping ourselves, we're not being selfish. We're putting ourselves in a better place to give and to serve others.
Jane, we have some additional questions from our audience members as well. A couple of them are centering around young adults, asking if they are encountering a young adult who needs help but does not want it, also how to build up, in particular, resilience for young adults, and any kind of supports that are specifically targeting the audience of young adults. So if we could speak to that.
Stacey, you want to start?
Okay, I'll take it. So, my center is the Center for Children and Families. So we deal with a lot of young people, youth, and young adults. Sometimes in some cases, young adults don't always know what's in their best interest, just because of all of what they're carrying. It could be due to trauma, it could be due to the stress, it could be due to a lot of pressures. And there are times when help may need to be sought, even if they don't want it. So in Alexandria, you can call emergency services for them to do an assessment to see if the person needs help where they can stay safe. First thing is safety. Then we can talk about some of the other ways of helping them once safety is established. If a person is in an imminent danger, nothing else is going to be able to get through until we establish the safe, first and foremost. And then building resilience, I think it's really helpful when young people are engaged in their own interventions. They're engaged, they're active participants in what they need to move forward. Their voice as a partner in their intervention, as a contributor, as an expert in their own experience, that being folded into how you move forward, because the resilience journey for one person is going to be different from the one for another person. I mentioned before, starting with strengths. What is that person's strengths? How can we build on those? How can we build on those strengths, those interests, those motivations that they have? Not Stacey's motivations, that young person's motivations, and work with them and help them, as Dr. Marquez said early, find meaning, find a way of understanding a sense of purpose. I think those are some starting points, but we can't do the other stuff if the safety is a question.
Right. I would only add to the notion of, again, I sometimes feel like I sound like a broken record, the notion of connection, connecting with the youth at their space, at their level. We have an epidemic of suffering amongst our youth. We have an epidemic of depression and anxiety and suicidality amongst our youth. And many times the pain within our youth, especially boys, comes out as anger, and comes out as defiance, comes out as oppositionality. And we have even given labels to all of that in the world of psychology and counseling and clinical social work, and we have made it this diagnosis. But the reality is that the human experience that is being a youth comes with changes in the personality that come from changes of the brain, and changes in our hormonal system. And I was a young at one point or another, and I remember thinking, I know better than anybody else. I don't need no therapist. I don't need no counselor. Why would I even ask for it? No. But I also remember struggling at that time with many different things that were difficult for me to process. And there was also that space of, well, what people are going to think if I talk about this, or people are going to judge me. So having that connection with your youth and having the sit down time to say, you know what, I see that you're struggling. What can we do to make this better? And just having the conversation. Once the person gets to that space where they're having the conversation, look for help. Don't wait. Counseling is for everybody, for children, for youth, for adults, for everybody. So go look for help. And once you look for help, stay connected and engage in the process. As a parent, I see a lot of parents and I see a lot of counselors that are doing this. And I scold all of the residents and all of the interns that come through the Center for Education on the notion of you need to involve parents in the process of therapy of their youth. You're not there to be the best friend of that kid. You're there to be that person that is going to help that kid connect with their natural world and develop the tools that he needs to stay connected so they won't need you as a counselor. I want to be a great counselor and have a great connection with that youth, but I don't want to be the only person that that youth comes to for advice and for connection. I am a true believer of natural connections. And when I'm doing treatment planning and when I'm doing safety planning, even in our safety plans for at-risk youth, we have this notion of who could you call? And can we call them now and let them know that they're in your safety plan? And can we share the strategies that we are setting up and the things that you will need to be able to cope or to be safe, or what things they will need from you? Let's talk about all of that. Let's have the conversation. It involves more work for the counselor. It involves more work for the parent. It involves more work for everybody, but it is what is necessary in order for people to engage in those connections in the space outside of the clinical realm. I use a lot of concepts that come from the home builders model from the 80s. And I'm actually very good friends with the founder of the intensive in-home model. And he and I have had many conversations about this, Dr. Richard Shepler. He's actually the current director of the Begun Center in Case Western Return. And the idea of connecting with the natural resources of the youth is extremely important for safety. Connecting with people that they feel they can trust and bringing them to the table, to the conversation, and engaging with them and having them be involved in the life of the child to ensure the safety of children.
And Dr. Marquez, to that point, we also have an untapped secret weapon, I think, in our communities, and that's other youth, other young people who may be a little bit further along. Maybe they have some other stronger supports, but sometimes we can tap other youth to support other youth, you know, and this sort of peer support model is something that we definitely like to engage both with youth and with parents. Parents who have the lived experience, parents who, and kids who have struggled with the thing that we want to help the other kids with. Sometimes they want to hear it from a few. Sometimes they want to hear it from someone who is around, not me, but someone who is kind of like generally around their age. And I think when we can tap those resources among our community partners, among our various commissions and those kinds of things where we're encouraging youth members, making sure that we have an array of resources, including peers, to help.
Thank you. And do we have a quick question in the question box?
I don't know. There are definitely several more questions. I don't know if there's a quick one, but there are definitely several that are centering around cultural norms and suicide, as well as helping our diverse communities access services or being more amenable to services. So if that can be addressed, it's not necessarily quick, but.
Well, we'll take a stab at making it as rapid as we can. Who wants to start? Dr. Marquez.
Sure. For the Latino community specific, I will speak of I work with every member of the different communities in Prince William County, but for the Latino community specifically, there's a lot of stigma and there's a lot of negativity in the context of counseling and therapy and seeing a psychiatrist, mainly because many of the practices that existed in the United States, perhaps until the 80s, 70s, 60s, of family members using psychologists or psychiatrists to put somebody away that was difficult continue to happen. That was a true reality, particularly for women in the Latin American communities. Also, the idea, well, I guess the idea that the stigma itself has some negative connotations where people are called these negative names that ache to the notion of to quote, crazy or things of that nature or worse. So one thing that we do a lot in the center is that we work with our PCPs to normalize the process of therapy and counseling. And at the center, all of our primary care doctors and providers conduct health screenings and mental health screenings. So we have developed a universal model where all professionals in dental, primary care, OBGYN, and pediatric have the conversation of, how's your mood? Are you having difficulties concentrating? Are you eating okay? Are you feeling anxious? So in that same context, when people come to their primary care doctor and they see, oh, this is a conversation that my primary care doctor is having with me as part of my physical, that actually helps with the normalization. In terms of having people connect as a therapist or as a counselor, I think that the one thing that I do that I hear people say always to me, oh wow, I get it, is this notion of mental health and physical health are not separate from one another. So and I go to that space of explaining to people in the most basic of notions. Pain is pain, and if you have emotional pain, you should go to somebody that can help you with that, in the same way that if you go to your PCP because you have physical pain, because you know he's going to be able to help you. And I do a lot of education and I do a lot of work within that space, especially with the different family members that are in the higher totems of the structure. I do respect that a lot. I think that in the space of working in diversity, you have to understand who is at the head of the table and respect that individual and bring them to the conversation. Sometimes people think, oh, well, the patriarchal culture. Sometimes it's the matriarchal culture. Each group that we have in our communities, even within the Latino community, have different structures inside of the family structure. So I sometimes find myself talking to a grandma. I sometimes find myself talking to a grandpa. I sometimes find myself talking to this uncle who's the oldest uncle that brought everybody from another country and has supported everybody. And I bring those people into the connection and into the process of treatment planning and the process of education and discussion. So I guess my biggest point in the space of answering how to help diverse groups with the process of therapy or counseling or dealing with mental health issues or emotional issues, I think that the essence is in connecting with the natural environment of the individual that you're trying to help. I cannot emphasize that more.
Yeah, and I would just add that racial trauma is real. That's a real thing, and it's chronic in our country. And we talked about trauma being a risk factor for suicide, for depression, for anxiety, and those kinds of things. And racial trauma is something that we have to take into consideration. Starting to look for some clues, I mean, there are different characteristics in terms of higher suicide rates and lower suicide rates. And the lowest suicide rate is among Black women. And when we look at that group more closely, we do see some of those protective things. Connection to spirituality tends to be big. And let me do a little caveat here. That doesn't mean that they aren't at risk. That just means that proportionally fewer do commit suicide. A strong sense of heritage is a protective factor, and we can tap into that. Connection to esteem, those things that basically come together in that cultural experience that end up being protective. Tapping into, again, it's not just a problem focus. When we look at the strengths that groups bring, we can elevate those strengths as part of the healing process, recognizing definitely the source of the pain and also the source of the healing is an important part of it, both as was mentioned before, physically and emotionally. But there are clues in what we see in the information and how people can access those things that will mitigate the risk factors with protective factors.
Thank you. And I think just because we're about to run out of time, I'll just put out, if you have a question, go ahead and put it into the box, write it in, because we will then get the questions to our panelists, and they're generously sharing their time to get answers back that we will go ahead then and get out to everyone who's attended and actually who signed up for the webinar. So please use this last few minutes. If you have a question and didn't get it in, go ahead and put it in at this point. I would also ask that when you receive by email an evaluation of this evening's webinar, we would most appreciate your feedback, your very honest feedback, because this is an annual kind of thing. September is Older Virginians Mental Health Month, Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. Every single year, we want to know how to do this better, how to be more meaningful for you, and your evaluations will help enormously. So just on behalf of SPAN, thank you to our panelists. You're awesome, both of you. Gosh, this has just been chock-a-block full of information and also good thought-provoking kind of information. And I think what we've seen is there really isn't a crystal ball for what one of my clients says is now the newest acceptable swear word. And she said, oh, it's 2020. You just, when all of it happens, you just say, what, the 2020 is going. And I've taken that on, and I really do appreciate that, because we don't know. I haven't found the crystal ball. I don't think anyone has, and I don't think it's going away very soon. So we're all going to have to build those coping mechanisms and build them into resilience against a tough enemy that we can't see, and has done incredible damage in every country across the globe. A couple of thoughts that come to mind, just those little things that we can do that sound like they might take a lot of time, but when you think about it, if you take them one bite at a time, the way you eat an elephant, they really don't take that much time, and they might make an enormous difference in somebody's life. One of the groups I'm familiar with has gal pals, where it's sort of like Secret Santa. You reach, we all were, I don't know how randomly, but we were given names, and nobody knows whose gal pal is whose. So we're just doing little things, sending emails, dropping something off at the person's front porch, calling them, doing whatever to let them remember, I do care about you. You're very important in my life. And this is just a little way of showing it. I think another was a church went through the directory and looked at who this intergroup thought probably lived alone, and divvied the list up and just started making calls to the people that they thought might well just feel totally isolated and be very, very down with things. Just enormous good feedback from that. Some of the children in my neighborhood are painting rocks. I guess that's between Zoom classes. They're painting rocks, shellacking them, and then taking them to some of the, what we call older originals in the neighborhood, just leaving them on their front porch with messages you know, maybe a little ladybug painted on, or a message of hope, a message of cheer. And that's produced wonderful kinds of bonding in the neighborhood. A couple of other children got their sidewalk chalk out and went specifically to some of the older folks' homes and decorated the sidewalk in front of their house, so that all of a sudden when the door was open, it was pow. Here was a wonderful rainbow or unicorn or whatever. Just some kind of sunshine on the sidewalk that brightened people's days. So as you think about those ideas and put them into, and expand upon that, put them into action and emotion, share them. Because if every neighborhood in Northern Virginia starts doing that, I know that we're going to do a better job of getting through the pandemic and coming out on the other side of it, whenever that is, stronger because of it. So just a word of thanks to the folks who helped put this, make this happen. Our presenters, Dr. Chandler, Dr. Marquez, thank you so much. To Jamie McDonald and Nikisha Lakins, I apologize. I knew I would mess that up. Nikisha, thank you. We're tech people beyond belief. They knew the answer of exactly how to make things happen. So thank you. Alan Lomax, Tricia Rogers, you are the gasoline for every engine. I'll tell you, the two of you, I think, could organize and get things rolling to put on whatever needed being to be done. And to CSB directors, the prevention folks in CSB, thank you. It's in Virginia, we don't always focus on, well, let me restate, we don't very often focus on prevention as a state policy, and it's a shame. The work you do points out how very important it is that we work on that prevention end, not just curing and fixing, but taking the bull by the horns and getting ahead of time. So with that, if we can flip to the next slide, we have the websites for the different community services boards. This information is on the SPAN website, so that we don't have to take too much time with that and you don't have to hurriedly write it down. And then again, the list of resources, those for if you have a crisis kind of situation, there is a ton of information on the SPAN website for that crisis, but also then for preventing the crises and for following through after the crisis has been de-escalated to some extent. With that, the slides will be up on the website, and we just thank you. Have a wonderful evening, and together we really can make it through this pandemic and whatever is before us, and we'll be so much more resilient, each of us. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
And with that, we can say good evening.